Crowd, I think we're about ready to go. You ready to do this, team? Firstly, I want to thank you for all the support, guys, in the podcast. We're starting to really increase our view count as well, which is really great. And the point of the podcast is obviously to get it out to as many people as possible. Good morning, Sandy and Amanda. How are you, guys? All right, let's rip in. Hey, Johnny. Hey, Rel. Let's get into another episode, team. Ready to go? Let's go. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you come to when you are sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. We are nearing 400 episodes. I think this is maybe 394, so we're on the countdown. We've been doing the podcast for, I think it's now 4 years, and so clocking it up. We have done very few episodes on hormones, and it dawned on me this morning that I pretty much need to address this because this is a really, really big thing, particularly off the back of the recent retreat that we did. So let's get stuck into it. You've probably said to yourself, maybe at some point, my hormones are just off, right? Maybe you've blamed them for some weight gain, some cravings, some low energy that you're feeling, or maybe you just feel like a totally different version of yourself. If that's you, I see you. And look, you might be onto something. Hormones do all of those things. But are they the main reason that we struggle? Are they the real villain? Or are they getting blamed? And the truth is a little bit more layered. So this episode is for anyone that's in their 30s, 40s, 50s or beyond and wondering, why am I gaining fat, particularly around this midsection here, despite all the work that I seem to do? Or the exercise that I seem to do? Why is my sex drive just disappeared? And why am I always tired? So let's unpack it in a clear, no BS way. I'm going to approach this from a more general perspective and use this podcast to point people back to when they ask questions about general hormones. I'm not going to dive super deep into menopause on this podcast, but what I do want you to do as a result of this podcast is take an interest or at least have a very basic understanding of what hormones are so that you can perhaps investigate further if you feel that this could be an issue for you. Chat to your doctor about it, invite a conversation. So firstly, let's talk about what hormones actually do. Quick science without the science degree. Hormones they're basically chemical messengers. They tell your body what to do. If it's not your nervous system that's telling your body what to do, it's your hormones. And I'm talking about everything from hunger, fat storage, sex drive. We've actually got around 50 known hormones in humans. And the major players that some of you guys might have heard about, if you've wondered, like, what are hormones? Insulin. Insulin's really important for blood sugar regulation. You would know this if you're a pre-diabetic or a diabetic. We've got cortisol. Cortisol is the main stress hormone. We've got leptin and ghrelin. These two kind of work in opposites to regulate your hunger. We've got our thyroid hormone. This is huge in our metabolism. And then we've got our sex hormones. These are estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, but there's another 40 or so on top of that. We tend to focus on this kind of 8 to 10 because these are the ones that have the biggest impact. Now, the thing about hormones is when they're, inverted commas, balanced, you feel good. When they're out of whack, it almost feels like you're fighting your own body. So we're going to go into a little bit more specifics about the sex hormones and the modern human. So how is it impacting us in the current world? We're going to go to men first. The situation is, men, that testosterone levels are tanking. Do you guys know that the average male today has about a 30 to 40% lower testosterone than your grandfather did at the same age? 30 to 40% lower. Now, whilst it's not clearly understood exactly why this is, it's likely to be a combination of chronic stress, poor sleep, shitty diets, plastics and toxins in our food supply, less lifting, and more sitting, more alcohol, and less sunlight. Now, which of those factors are the most important? We don't really know, but it's likely to be a combination of all of those things, lifestyle things. And so some symptoms of low testosterone are going to be low sex drive, brain fog, low mood, belly fat, loss of drive and motivation. So you would know a lot of people perhaps that have gone down the therapy route, just like in menopause. And for people and men with clinically low testosterone, if it's done under the right settings, it can be life-changing. If you have a real hormonal problem where you're not producing enough testosterone, it's like, oh my God, I can't do anything. Let's go over to the women's side. When we talk about peri and menopause, this transition can start usually mid to late 30s. It can start later, or it can be a product of some medical event that's happening, but it can go on for years. And what happens is estrogen and progesterone, the two female sex hormones, they basically drop off a cliff, long story short. And it's very dramatic compared to men, where men's testosterone generally tapers off, but women's can just drop off a cliff. And any of you women that have been through this, you know exactly what we're talking about, right? And you could speak to it a lot better than I can. So some symptoms that people get are hot flashes, brain fog, mood swings, weight gain, sleep disruption, increased anxiety. It's actually a huge list. But most importantly, for women, low estrogen, low progesterone increases the risk of some real health impacts, not just the symptoms, but osteoporosis, heart disease, muscle loss. These things are significant events to happen. So hormone replacement therapy was once something that was feared. Now, I'm not an expert in this, but I know, and obviously if you were at our recent retreat, you would know that whether it's men or women, hormone replacement therapy is a very important option in terms of consideration and something to speak to your GP, endocrinologist, or sex-specific doctor about. So let's go on to maybe some things that people say about hormones. I'm guessing that you guys have said this at a certain time in your life. I definitely have. Number one, I'm not losing weight anymore. It must be my hormones. Or maybe we say, oh, I'm over 40, so I just can't lose weight. Stress is making me fat. Menopause ruins my metabolism. So a good question to ask is there any truth to that? Those kind of the age leading to the decline in hormones having a direct impact on our weight, our motivation, etc. So the truth about it, let's look at the underlying unemotional truth, is that weight gain is caused by a calorie imbalance. If you haven't heard that before, when we talk about being in a calorie deficit and trying to lose weight, if you have a calorie imbalance where the calories coming in are more than the calories going out, you'll put on weight, regardless of where your hormones are. This isn't a hormone problem. Hormones shift. Absolutely they do. Fat gain, to be brutal on this, and this is sometimes hard to hear, fat gain, particularly after 35 and 40, is often about lifestyle drift than just hormones. Think about the difference in how you live your lifestyle at 40 and 50 and 60 versus when you were 20 and 25. More responsibilities, kids perhaps, marriage, finances, all the different things. But, hormones can definitely make it harder to stick to the plan. And this is where I want to get into a bit more of the nuts and bolts about how hormones can make it harder to stick to the plan. Because if you're a lady or a man and you're over 40 and you're really struggling to execute, you're really struggling, you feel stuck, whilst a calorie deficit is what is needed to lose weight, you probably know that, but you're sick of hearing it, right? So what you'd probably want is some understanding of how this is impacting you, this change to your hormones. Well, number one, hormones influence hunger and cravings. So some examples of this, we have a hormone called ghrelin. And when you are sleep deprived and stressed because of the things that are going on in your life, what happens is ghrelin, the hunger hormone, goes up. And what do you think happens there? It drives cravings. Now, in the converse, leptin, which is the satiety hormone, the one that says, hey, Jeff, Jackie, you're full, actually drops. So what that means is your experience of fullness is not what it used to be. In addition to that, you have fluctuations, for example, for women during menopause in estrogen. This can lead to cravings for carbohydrates, right? And emotional eating because of the up and down nature of the hormone cycle. For men, low testosterone in men kills motivation. A man might be sitting there so run down from stress and undersleeping that his drive to go out and be the man that he wants to be is just absent. And this might be to do with testosterone. The result, you're more likely to snack. You're more likely to binge, even if you're following a plan like we do inside of Better Body Academy. Number two, how else can hormones impact? Well, they can mess with your ability to make good decisions, right? Wouldn't you agree? Any woman that's been through peri and menopause knows exactly what we're talking about. Chronic stress leads to a surge in cortisol. This doesn't directly cause fat gain, but what it does do is leads to your sleep being shithouse, total emotional eating and cravings, less impulse control. So you're more likely to go, fuck it, I just give up. And as a result, you don't stick to the plan as consistently as you otherwise would. And that means even though you have a desire to perhaps get on top of your weight or train every day, it's hard because you have this interruption to your ability to be decision making for the good. Thyroid hormone, for example, it impacts your metabolic rate. And so you might be under eating, but if you have a thyroid hormone, your energy levels are just going to absolutely tank if you've got a thyroid hormone problem. This is extremely common. Or maybe you've got low estrogen or low testosterone and your mood is just horrible. And then probably the final way the hormones can really make things more difficult is that if you have low testosterone and low estrogen, what happens is you start to lose muscle mass. So when you start to lose muscle mass, as well as all the shit that's going on as well with your mood and cravings, your metabolism slows down, right? You burn fewer calories, which means even if you're eating the same, maybe you're not in a calorie deficit because you're burning fewer calories. Now, if that all sounds horrible and it's starting to help you explain or understand why things are so difficult sometimes, particularly over the age of 40, I think what we should take out of this is that, it's not that calorie imbalance is not the cause. It's still the cause. But underlying or sitting over the top of that ability to balance your calories is a lot of behavioral and hormonal stuff that's going on with your body. And that's the stuff that's hard to contend with. If you've ever listened to this podcast before or heard my stuff before, you'll understand me constantly saying fat loss is simple. It is dead simple, but losing weight is hard because of hormones and because of our behavioral struggles, right? So when should you, if you're listening to this podcast episode and you're thinking, well, what should I do about this? That sounds like me. I haven't spoken to my doctor. At what point should you do something about it? Well, firstly, getting regular checkups is a pretty good thing to do anyway. It's worth investigating further if you're just constantly drained. You're constantly drained despite the fact that you're sleeping well and your nutrition is pretty good, but you're just constantly drained. This could be a hormonal issue and definitely worth investigating further. I certainly would. Maybe you've had some sudden weight gain or weight loss out of nowhere could be attributed to some stuff with your hormones. Or maybe it's irregular periods or changes to your libido as a guy. These can all be maybe indications that you should go and speak to your doctor about it. So if I was advising clients when I'd go and get tested, it would be like, when you know you're doing a lot of things right, like you're sticking to the plan, but you're just not feeling right. Something feels off. And as I say that, I can think of a number of clients that I've had this exact conversation with. They're just like frustrated. And then they've gone to their doctor, particularly females, and realized that actually they're going through this peri to menopause period of their life, and that's what's hitting them. Maybe your libido's disappeared, you've just got chronic fatigue, you've got these weight changes, or you're just kind of like depressed or anxious, and for no real reason. These are indications when I'd say you'd go and get tested. So what would you do? Okay. You don't go on TikTok and self-diagnose. You would go get a full blood panel. You would test your testosterone levels, your estrogen levels, your progesterone levels, your cortisol levels, all the hormones that you can get tested. But I think the most important thing is to actually have a conversation with a doctor. And if your doctor, if you feel like you're getting resistance from your doctor and your doctor's just like, yeah, go away, you need to go and find another doctor. Because these blood tests aren't necessarily a reliable indicator. In fact, if we look at the way the market seems to have moved, at least in my observations, is it's very much symptoms based. If you take a blood sample at any one point in time, it might be up, it might be down. That's because hormones go up and down. They're not static, right? Like maybe other things like cholesterol or blood pressure or blood glucose, even a little bit more consistent. Hormones can be all over the place. So if you just take a snapshot at one point in time, it might not necessarily be a good indication, but your symptoms are. And your symptoms, like the ones that we've talked about up to this point, could be enough to diagnose. Okay, let's finish off this podcast episode with how can you improve your hormone health naturally? Because I think what a lot of people will do is they will go on a HRT and TRT, so the medical component, but they don't pair it with a lifestyle intervention. This is the same as when people go on a Ozempic, but they don't pair it with a lifestyle intervention instead. And they're still feeling like they're running in mud. As an example, as a bloke, you could go on TRT, but if you're stressed to the tits, you're not sleeping and you're not doing resistance training, it's still not going to feel any better. So let's look at some habits that can move the needle. Sleeping enough. 7 to 9 hours a day. Probably depends on the individual. You might know for you what your kind of good feeling range is, but you need to be getting enough sleep, and that's crucial for every hormone. It always comes back to sleep. Number 2, strength training. Whether you're a guy or a girl, it does not matter. You have to protect the muscle that you have on board. You have to protect the bone that you have. If you don't do that, what's going to end up happening is you're going to start to lose that muscle, lose that bone, and then get weaker, and metabolism slows down and it becomes horrible. Strength training is critical, especially paired with protein. Protein helps the satiation. It helps the cravings. It supports muscle building. If you are part of Better Body Academy, you know that we double down on this protein thing. If you could just do one thing, to increase the amount of protein you eat, this will have multiple benefits, including helping your hormone profile. Walking. Okay, what does walking do? It lowers stress. It gets you out in the sunlight to help with your vitamin D. It gets you thinking about stuff other than the things that are on your mind. I have the best ideas when I start walking. Maybe it's with your partner or your kids. Reducing alcohol. This is huge, and I can't understate this. Alcohol interrupts testosterone and estrogen balance and production. And even though alcohol sends you to sleep quicker, it stops you from getting into the deep cycles of sleep that are where repair and recovery actually happens. And then sunlight. If you're not getting enough sunlight, you're not getting enough vitamin D, and it is impacting what are called your circadian rhythms, the natural rhythms of light and dark that the brain work off. And if you're not getting any sunlight, you might live in a country like the UK or Canada like I do, and in the winter you go through periods, it feels like 8 months of just like grayness. If you're not getting out and getting enough sunlight, this is a massive impactor to your hormones. Let's go through them again. Sleeping enough, strength training, protein, walking daily, reducing alcohol, and getting enough sunlight. It's not glamorous, but it works. Now, importantly, and this is a good place to kind of wind the podcast up, no amount of being perfect in sleeping, strength training, protein, walking, reducing alcohol, and sunlight, no amount of that is going to stop you from going through menopause. And boys, to be honest, you're just not ever going to be able to stop the drop-off in testosterone that you had when you were 20 years old at 80 years old. It's just not going to work like that. But if you are pairing therapy with improvements to your lifestyle, you are giving yourself the best chance of not aging quickly and suffering the complications that come with what we've talked about in this podcast episode. So here's the deal. Hormones absolutely play a result in your energy levels, your body composition, your fat stores, your cravings, your mood, especially as you get older. They are not an excuse, but they are a signal. And if you're feeling a little bit off, start with the basics. Start moving your body a little bit more. Start treating it a little bit by fueling it a little bit better. And sleep like it actually matters. And if things don't get better, you're not losing weight and you feel like you're doing everything right and you've spoken to your coach and it's just not working, well, then it might be time to actually look a little bit more deeper into it. And my experience is particularly with women, is that if you're not the one driving this, you just get lost in the system. Particularly when you consider that the amount of study that GPs have to go through to complete their medical certifications, what portion of that is about menopause and hormones? A tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. Like count the hours on one hand. So you've got to be the person that's driving this. Guys, we're going to leave it there. This has been the Better Body Academy podcast coming to you for another episode. I really hope that this one has been helpful. If you've got any questions, I'm going to stick around and answer some. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace. All right, team. Tell me, was that helpful? Hopefully you got something out of that. Might need to be listened to a couple of times because there was probably a lot of information in that one. Ralph is saying, got mine done, just waiting for results. I like that, Ralph. Good stuff. Hey, Jace, shout out to our man, Maxie Hall. Happy birthday, brother. You sexy boy. Maxie, I'm very proud of you, mate. Well done. Crazy good. What about you guys on Instagram, Facebook? Is there any questions that you want to ask off the back of that podcast? Happy to answer them. Not proclaiming to be an expert in any way in this field, but what I do know is that it's incredibly important that you get on top of that. Nika, so helpful, brother. Mate, I'm here for it, brother. That's what it's all about. Anything you need, mate, if you got some podcast suggestions, send them through to me and I'm happy to help. Really good, Nikki says. Yep. Shari says, great. Thank you so much. Good podcast, Gene. I love this. This is great. Look at the girls. Rach says, very helpful and definitely where I'm at. Just got my blood form the other day. Need to get it done hopefully tomorrow. Yeah, and again, Rach, as I mentioned at the end of the podcast, it's really important that you are the one driving it. The doctors are not going to come to you and like try to dig out what's going on for you. You need to be the one. Tam says, revisit this having blood test today. Actually, this is good, but do not undermine the importance of symptoms. Symptoms are really, really, really important. Okay. Unfortunately, Jace's GPs tell us weight gain is because of perimenopause. So I think what we should take out of this podcast is that it is related. it is related, right? It's definitely related. But I think a lot of people, particularly when we do lives, right? People say menopause causes weight gain. It doesn't cause weight gain. Weight gain is caused by being in a calorie surplus on an average basis. That said, the difficulty about trying to not get in a calorie surplus is all this stuff going on in the background. So it's kind of like, think of it like this. This is an analogy that's just come to me. I don't know if it's any good. So think of it like this. For those of you that follow sporting teams, right, that have a sporting team, how frustrating is it when your sporting team just can't go out on the weekend and execute? What is wrong with them? They're a team full of talent, but they just can't pull it together. Now we say to them, we think to ourselves, like, these guys have the talent, they've got the team, what's wrong with them? But in the background, what is complicating this is the fact that the team is made up of individuals with individual things that are impacting them, motivations and things going on in their life and connectivity and the like. It's the same as our fat loss journey. The plan of how to lose weight is simple, but the fuckery is all the stuff that's going on in the background. Xanth is saying, great podcast, Jace. Find a doctor, yes, GP that listens and supports you. And this is it, Xanth. You've really been a pioneer in Better Body Academy, yourself and Janine particularly, for really making sure that people understand that it's got to be driven by you, not driven by the doctor. The doctor's got a million responsibilities. It has to be driven by you. Really good point, girl. What else have we got? Anything here? Nikki says, I would love a basic plan routine for menstrual cycle for eating, training, and when to relax. To support my hormones, etc., and work with my fat loss. Nick, I think the point that you've got to think about there is, again, let's try as much as we can to simplify things back a little bit. And where do we start? We start by not taking on too much, okay? Like, don't worry about trying to get into the gym tomorrow. We need to start on an eating plan and just walking a bit more. That's where we start. You don't need necessarily a menopause-specific plan to get started. But what we do want to know is what's happening in the background, right? That's where we want to involve doctors to understand a bit more about this. Obviously, this has become a very big topic inside of Better Body Academy. And again, I invite you guys and thank you guys for talking about it. Team, I'm going to love you and leave you on that note. I hope it's been helpful. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can simply search Better Body Academy podcast in any of the podcast players. You will find it. And then we'll see you guys in the next episode. Cheer.